Jaron Jarvis Channel, Top 20 Scary Stories of the Day from Reddit nosleep. 2018-09-13. Story 1, This Isn't My Husband Update 2. I'm sorry I haven't been updating in the past few days. Things have been getting really weird. I saw the neurologist on Friday, and although I did get a concussion in my car accident, he said that I shouldn't have had enough of an impact to cause any issues. I insisted on an MRI or CAT scan though. He sent me to do both. There was a bit of bruising on my scalp, but they didn't seem to find any problems with my actual brain. So they've kept me here for the past 5 days, trying to figure out what's wrong with me. 5 days. I feel like it's been forever. They've put me on several different types of medicine. One type is called Abilify. It sounds like it might do some good. I'm hoping, anyway. Clonazepam, too. It makes me feel funny but kind of warm. I've been nauseous lately too. I figure it has to be the meds. The nurses are watching me intently. Like they know I'm hiding something. I mean, I'm just hiding the fact that I'm not really from here, but I feel so guilty. What happened to the me from here? Is she dead? Did we trade consciousness? Is she in my world, learning that her mom is alive? That her best friend is someone who was supposed to have died when she was in high school? Or is she floating in limbo, wondering what the hell happened and praying that something changes eventually for her? I won't ever know. And that's terrifying. So, my mom is dead. I found that out last time I spoke with everyone. Now I found out Angelica is dead too. Oh my god. I still can't believe it. On Friday before I saw the neurologist, I looked up Angie by her maiden name. It took me a while to remember it, since she's been married nearly forever. I thought she was. God, this is all so confusing. Angie died when she was in high school. It was a car crash. She was driving and went around a corner a bit too fast. The car rolled once, which shouldn't have killed her, but her head was crushed when it rolled to the driver's side. I found the newspaper, which had the details of the crash, and then her obituary as well. My beautiful, incredible, wonderful best friend is dead. She never got married. I didn't go to her wedding, get drunk and hit on the best man. We didn't plan her wedding down to the last detail, and she never went on her honeymoon to Niagara Falls. She never had her gorgeous little boy, or her dog Sandy, named after the dog on Annie. I looked up the man she married. Didn't marry. Couldn't. He's still alive. He married someone else. Just a slip of a girl. Couldn't be far out of high school. Apparently here he likes them young. Tom keeps telling me it's going to be okay. I'm not sure he's right. This Tom, he's subtly different from my Tom. My baby, Andrew, Drew, is starting to like me. Tom let me hold him for a few minutes, and he didn't cry. He actually looked me right in the eyes. I could see the distrust there. He doesn't know me. But he's trying. Just like me. I think you guys were right. Sort of. I don't think I died in the accident. I do think my subconscious slipped from my world into yours. Somehow, I am now here. No one here is the same as they were in my world. It's weird, how some things are the same, and others are completely different. Take the World Trade Center. I found out yesterday that it was attacked and destroyed on September 11, 2001. Where I'm from, it was the Chrysler building that was destroyed. One plane crashed into it, and after almost 2 hours the entire thing collapsed. The second plane was lost just past Long Beach. Ended up in the ocean. There were actually a few survivors. It was hell to watch on television, not knowing if anyone was going to be okay. Take Caleb, too. He was Mom's second husband. In my world she was just a single mom. She never really had any interest in dating after she had me. Or if she did, it was so discreet that I never knew about it. Caleb came to see me on Saturday. In the hospital. It was the strange man I'd seen in the picture of Mom's funeral, the one standing beside Tom and I. He was tall, and very kind-looking. He took one look at me and asked Tom if he could speak to me privately. Then when everyone was out of the room he asked me who the hell I was. I was really confused. Not sure how to answer him. He said he knew the daughter he raised, and I wasn't her. I couldn't believe it. This complete stranger knew. He was right, of course, but how do you tell someone you think you're from another universe? Especially if you don't want to get locked up. So instead, I pleaded a migraine and asked him to leave. He left, but not before threatening me to tell him everything. I'm scared. The drugs are making me hazy. I don't want to forget my old home. I don't want to forget my Tom. I don't want to forget my mom, or Angie. But I can feel them slipping away. I can feel that I'm losing myself. I want so badly to go home. I'm so homesick. I just want everything to be the way they were before. I don't want to have to bond with Drew, or explain things to Caleb, and I really don't want to be stuck in the hospital any longer. I want to leave. I want to get out. But I don't think they will let me leave. Story 2, I got a call from someone who says they kidnapped my girlfriend. It was about 7 p.m. last Saturday when my phone rang. Since I was just at home watching Riverdale on Netflix, I briefly glanced at the caller ID before answering. Restricted. That was no big deal to me, because restricted numbers are pretty common these days. Hello? I asked. There was no immediate answer. Putting the phone closer to my ear, I strained to listen for any kind of sound. I even looked at my phone to make sure the caller didn't hang up or something. But no, the call was still in progress. Hello? Anyone there? I asked again, raising my voice slightly. Still no answer. Okay, now I was starting to get irritated. I was just about to end the call when I finally heard something from the other end. Is Cody there? It was a woman asking in a faint voice. The voice was so quiet that I had to lean in to hear it. This is he. What is it? Before the woman could answer, there was a piercing shriek on the other end of the call. Hearing it was downright terrifying. I had no idea that a human being could make that kind of sound. I stood there, wondering what a person had to do or experience to create a noise like that. I looked at my phone again to make sure that sound really did come from my phone. I had no idea what to do, but I felt my brain kick in and I spoke up. Are you okay? What the hell is going on? I could hear the sound of someone breathing on the other end. The momentary shock of what I had just heard was fading away and now I was just getting pissed off. We have your girlfriend. We took her after she left her shift at the mall today. Give us the money she owes us or the next time you find her will be in a body bag. A man's voice barked out before the call ended abruptly. I just stood there in middle of my apartment, staring at my phone in shock. That couldn't have been what I just thought it was. But as I was alone with my thoughts, paranoia slowly began creeping in. How did they know my name? Right then my girlfriend walked into the living room from the kitchen where she had been heating up some leftovers for dinner. Hey babe, what's up? She asked brightly while holding a plate of pizza in her hand. It only took her a moment to take in my expression and realize something was up. Everything okay? I don't know, was all I could say. Someone called me asking for Cody and then all I heard was a horrible scream and then some sketchy sounding guy said they had taken my girlfriend after she left work and to hand over the money she owed them. Was it a prank? She looked as confused and creeped out as I was. Obviously I am right here and I don't work at the mall, so we know that's BS. Of course I know that part's not true, but I honestly don't know what to think. I hope it is all a fake. If it wasn't for that scream, I wouldn't give it a second thought. I've never heard a sound like that in my life and I've seen every scary movie there is. Right? She put down her plate and sat down on the couch facing the TV. I mean, I could call the cops but the number is restricted. The only thing I could give them is that they were looking for a guy named Cody and the woman was taken from her job at the mall today. Do whatever you think you should, sweetie, she offered supportively. So my girlfriend sat and watched while I called the local police department. I told them what happened and asked if a woman was reported missing from the local mall today. They said no, which immediately made me feel better. After that, there wasn't much that either I or the police could do, but they thanked me for trying to help and we left it at that. All I can say is that I sure hope that whoever was calling me was pulling an incredibly bad, but still pretty sick prank. With nothing left to be done, I did what I could to put it out of my head. Which I was successful with until today. I was watching the evening news when one of their later stories caught my attention. On the other side of the state, a local woman had been found dead after having gone missing the previous weekend. After interviewing the usual law enforcement and friends/associates of the missing, they showed some pictures of the woman. I felt my heart climb into my chest when I saw that it was Alicia, an old ex-girlfriend of mine. We had broken up years ago and I haven't thought of her since. But then they showed some photos of her with her current boyfriend, a tall red-haired guy named Cody. Story 3, Scam, likely. I keep getting a call from the same person. I know it's a scam call, because of the scam likely that appears on my phone whenever the call comes through. It's a recording of a woman with a weird accent that I've never heard of before. I don't know how else to explain it other than it sounds like what an Australian accent crossed with a Spanish accent would sound like. Even weirder than that actually. Overpronounced R's and T's, the ois sound for the letter I, random things like that. Every time I get the call, it's the same woman, but I know it's not the same recording because something changes each time. That's why I keep answering the phone. I feel like I need to know what other information she's going to add to the otherwise scripted recording. The first 4 times I got a call, I didn't answer. I never answer my phone anyway, unless it's a number that's already been saved to my contacts, but the reason I answered was that they called me 5 times within the hour, so I picked up the 5th time. Hello, this is a phone call regarding sensitive information about your identity. Please remain on the line to speak to one of our representatives. This call may be monitored for quality assurance purposes. Yeah, right. I hung up right after that. The first calls happened on Monday, the 10th. On Tuesday, I got another call at about noon, but didn't pick up because I was in class. I was walking to my car when they called back, so I decided to pick up. That time, the recording was different. Hello Rachel Gonzalez, this is a phone call regarding sensitive information about your identity. Please remain on the line to speak to one of our representatives. This call will be monitored for quality assurance and evidence. I was weirded out by the fact that they knew my name, but it was the same woman, with the same weird accent, and most of the rest of the recording was the same. I hung up again though before I could be transferred to speak to one of their representatives. I got in my car and drove home. I got another call that evening, at about 6 p.m. I answered this time too, because the fact that they knew my name last time made me curious. Was this just a joke that one of my friends thought would be funny? Hello Rachel Gonzalez of 2202 Watts Rose Lane, this is a phone call regarding sensitive information about your identity. We know who you are. Please do not hang up, and remain on the line to speak to one of our representatives. This call will be monitored for quality assurance and evidence regarding your case. Please note that is not my actual address. I did not include that for obvious reasons. That time, I was almost certain that this had to be the work of one of my friends. Andrea was a tech geek, it was probably her doing, so I stayed on the line. There was a soft click, followed by music. Now, usually, when you're on hold with someone and music begins to play, it's some sort of soft classical music or some sort of happy tune. But this was not the case in this situation because the music that proceeded to play sounded like what it would sound like if you asked a toddler to play piano with their toes. It was awful and it was loud, and it was hurting my ears, so I distanced the phone from my ear as I waited for someone to pick up. I was on hold for about 5 minutes before there was another click, followed by a voice. Hello, this is worker 44A21, how can I help you today? A man's voice answered. I don't know. I replied. I tried to listen for snickering in the background, or any sound that would let me know that it was just my friends playing a prank on me. It was silent for a few seconds, followed by some typing, and then more silence. You're Rachel Gonzalez, right? Case 0013. He replied. Excuse me? I asked. More typing. Female, 5 foot 8 inches, 154 pounds, brunette, green eyes, born on August 15, 1997 at Mercy Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. How do you know that? I asked. Born to Claudia Gonzalez and David Lopez, who divorced in May of 2015. This isn't funny, I said, starting to feel like someone was watching me. I got up and closed all the curtains in the house, and walked into the hall, where I was out of view of all of the windows that won't do anything, you know. We already know you're in the house. The man replied. His tone had changed from fake happy secretary to creepy possessed adult in a horror movie. I hung up without another word and spent the next hour and a half sitting in the hallway until my sister and mum came home. They called 2 more times that day, but I didn't answer. Today when I woke up I had 71 missed calls, all from scam likely. I ignored them and went to class like nothing was wrong. When I got out of class, I had 3 more missed calls and a voicemail message. I clicked on the message in order to listen to it. Hello Rachel Gonzalez of 2202 Watts Rose Lane, this is a phone call regarding sensitive, important information about your life and well-being. We know who you are. We know where you are. Please answer the next call, and remain on the line to speak to one of our representatives if you wish to continue on with your life. Your call will be monitored for quality assurance and evidence regarding your case. Please be advised that if you do not comply with our request, we will be forced to terminate your existence. The next call came in an hour and a half ago. I answered, and stayed on the line. The same man who I had previously spoken to answered the phone again. Hello, Rachel. He said, hello. I replied, I am very glad that you answered the call. I was starting to think we were going to have to interfere. He chuckled. I did not find that funny. Yes, of course. I replied, hoping that he couldn't hear my voice shake. Right, okay, so judging from your case file, you are a new addition, and I'm assuming that you don't have any experience in the field. I didn't reply. Let's see here. I heard him typing for a while I tried to control my breathing. I was still very much hoping that this was all just an elaborate joke. Here we go. He exclaimed, your subject will be William Murphy of 1654 Oak Road. You have 72 hours to complete your assignment. Should you fail to succeed within the given amount of time, you will replace Mr. Murphy and become the subject. I'm sorry, subject? Subject for what? I asked. Well, I suppose that target is a better term for it. I don't understand. I don't know a William Murphy. I said, well, lucky you then. I've heard that killing a stranger is easier than a family member. I froze. Did you say kill? I asked. Yes. Please write down the following number and send pictures and video of the body for proof once you are done. 312 123 4x. Good luck. Oh, and don't try to run or get out this. If you do, we will know and you will be terminated immediately. The line went dead. I keep getting calls, every half hour, letting me know how much time I have left to complete my assignment. I don't know what to do. I don't want to kill a guy that I don't even know, but I also don't want to be terminated. I don't think I could kill someone. And I have no idea how I would even find William Murphy. I'm not sure what I'll do yet, but I'm posting this as a warning. Don't answer scam calls. And if you do, and you hear that same recording, well, good luck. Story 4, and you think your family is dysfunctional. No family is perfect. Mine is no exception. I need to tell this story because it's so bizarre. I can't even believe it's real. My mother grew up on a farm. She had 4 siblings. Her parents separated sometime in the late 1970s. It was shortly after the split up that my uncle Shane went missing. From what I've heard over the years from various family members, Shane was kind of a delinquent. My mother, Catherine, says he was always abusive. She was the baby of the bunch. She says her brother Shane would beat up the siblings. He was lazy, unruly and always causing problems. He was a bully. She recalled a story about him hitting a kid on the school bus so hard the boy had permanent damage to his vision. The 4 kids include Garrett, Shane, Stacy, and Catherine. My grandma's name was Rosemary. She worked nights at a factory 2 towns away, so the kids had a lot of freedom. My mom says the older kids would run away for a few days then come back home. They had little supervision with their father gone. My grandma was working and trying to run the farm that was left behind by my grandfather, so she had little time to devote to raising her kids. So Garrett, Shane and Stacy were always smoking pot and drinking, disappearing, then popping back up. Apparently, my uncle Shane, who was 15 at the time of his disappearance, maybe had an involvement with a biker gang. He was definitely experimenting with harder drugs than marijuana, like the other kids. He had even gotten caught selling some psychedelics at school. He was suspended, so the week before he disappeared, he was at home in trouble. After he went missing, rumors were flying that he had stolen drugs and money from the bikers. It was a Saturday night. My mom says she had a girlfriend over and they were hanging out in her bedroom upstairs. It was a large farmhouse. Shane's room was downstairs. Garrett was gone for the night. Stacy was hanging out in the living room with her boyfriend at the time. Shane's dog had a litter of puppies which were out in the barn. He was oddly enough afraid of the dark. So when he was leaving the house, Stacy asked where he was going. Just outside to check on the dogs, he told her. This was around 9:30 that night because Stacy was watching her favorite TV show Alice. The Carol Burnett show came on immediately after at 10 p.m. So she knew that was the last time she'd seen her brother was as Alice was on TV. Her boyfriend Cliff left around 10:45 p.m. because his curfew was 11. It had not dawned on her when Cliff left that she had not seen Shane in over an hour and a half. I know this from reading from the case file. Unfortunately, my Aunt Stacy was murdered by an abusive ex-boyfriend about a decade after her brother went missing. She had moved to Utah and was a nurse. He shot her 5 times in the parking lot of her apartment complex. On Sunday, when the family realized Shane was not around, he had already been gone about 18 hours. Grandma combed his room looking for any information. She found about $130 in bills rolled up in a sock drawer. If he was going to run away, he would have taken his money. Garrett told her. Yeah, but he runs off all the time and then comes back in a few days, my mother explained. She was only 12 at the time but recalled how her siblings would leave without notice. Shane never goes anywhere at night though, Garrett mentioned. You know he's afraid of the dark. No way would he have wandered off down the road in the dark of night. Their mother was uncertain, maybe someone picked him up. He would not officially be reported missing for 5 more days. When had not turned up by Thursday and his mother had called everyone she knew, neighbors, family, friends, and still no word, she was worried. She made a missing persons report. Over the years there were several rumors that circulated. People believed Shane had taken off, so there was a possibility he was alive and well. Other whispers were about the biker gang and how they had killed him. There were also rumors that one of the kids he bullied, well, maybe an angry father, had shown up and given him a taste of his own medicine. There had been several of Shane's victims over the years who'd ended up with permanent eye damage, broken arms, and a concussion. My grandma also considered him the worst and most out of control of her kids. Had she done something to Uncle Shane? The reason I even feel like I need to talk about all of this is because my grandma just died. My mom and uncle inherited the farm. It was sold off to a developer, and when they were tearing down the house, they dug up a body. It was the body of my missing uncle. He had been buried in the barn. Questions, obviously. How did no one smell the decomposing body? Investigators say the barn had so many funky smells anyway because of the few animals that were kept in there. Why did no one report him missing for 5 days? That gave someone plenty of time to bury him in there. My mother was baffled. She honestly had no idea who had killed her brother. She said my grandma would ask for years and years, "Do you know what happened to Shane? Do you know where he is?" My uncle Garrett has informed me, it was probably the best thing that could have happened to him. Shane was trouble. He was cruel in a way I've never seen before. He would have gone on to be a career criminal. He was always in doing wrong. I'm confident he would be in prison for murder by now. And then my mother alluded to the fact that Shane had inappropriate sexual contact with Stacy and my mother. She would not come out and say he molested them both, but it was pretty obvious that's what she meant. So here we are now. My grandmother dead. There is no way to know if she had something to do with it in order to protect her children. Maybe she felt she had no other alternative. Did Shane wrong a gang of rough bikers who killed him? Well, I know at one point he had made a threat to go to the police on those guys because they were pressuring him for the money he owed them, Garrett told me. Garrett seemed to have very little feeling about his brother's body being discovered. Had my uncle killed him? My mother was only 12 but had been a victim of Shane's abuse both physically and sexually. Even emotionally. Had she killed him after an attack and everyone helped hide the body? I only mention this because my uncle Garrett let it slip out that once after an alleged assault, my mother picked up a pair of sewing shears and stabbed Shane in the leg. He had to have stitches. And then Stacy, who was dead, had her own secrets which she's taken to the grave. It's like living in a murder mystery game where everyone is a suspect. I'm not sure what happened to my uncle. I just know my family history is darker than most. It keeps me up at night. I'm haunted by the whole thing. Story 5, once a month. I have never told this story to anyone, but it has been on my mind quite a bit after graduating college. I still am not sure if I believe it, or if I want to believe it for that matter. I was never one to believe in the supernatural. It all started with running. I had recently moved to transfer to another college. Instead of staying in the downtown area, I rented out a room in a house in the country. It was quite a ways from school, but it was cheap and I found a job nearby. The area was pretty spaced out with rolling hills and trees adorning the landscape. There were countless fields and farms stretching for miles on the surprisingly busy road. After about 2 days of settling in and getting to know my 2 new roommates, I googled my house's address to look up its location and surrounding area on Google Maps using the satellite function. There was one main road but several back roads that stretched a wide array of distances. I was looking for a path to run that would be around 10 miles. I found one that looked to be just right. But as I zoomed in I noticed that at one spot the road ceased to be paved and continued on for quite some time, around 4 miles, until it came back to a paved section. There were no houses along that section and both sides of the path were covered by trees. I was a little skeptical but not scared to pass an area like that alone, so the next day I decided to try it out. I have been a runner for most of my life. I do not do it competitively but more so for the exercise and also to think. I find it peaceful in a way. Moving from a big city to the country made it much more enjoyable for me. There were no cars to worry about, it was quiet, and the countryside was beautiful, especially in the morning when the sun rose. It was around 3 miles when I came to the point where the concrete ended and turned into a dirt road. Without hesitation I continued on through, and sure enough, just like I had seen on Google Maps, it was a heavily wooded stretch without a trace of a human being. No signs, tire marks, litter, nothing, almost as if no one ever came that way. Halfway down the path I stopped because something caught my eye. There was a house right by the side of the road and a man was outside watering what seemed to be a garden. When he saw me he did not seem startled or surprised at all. He just casually looked up, smiled and gave me a nod, and then focused his attention back to the garden. As time went on I ran the same route, sometimes twice, in the mornings on the weekends, and during the week in the afternoon if I could fit it into my schedule. I would see the man outside occasionally, watering his garden, or checking his mail, and he would give the same greeting, sometimes just waving his hand in the air, not even looking at me. One morning he was standing close to the road with his hands in his pockets, almost as if he were waiting for me. He came closer and put his hands up, signaling me to stop. This was the first time I had ever seen him up close and at a standstill. He was about 6 foot tall, maybe in his late 40s, lean, brown hair, short cut, glasses, pretty good looking guy to be honest, and he was wearing a white t-shirt tucked into some khaki pants with what looked to be designer shoes. He had an oddly welcoming aura about him and I was not in the least skeptical to stop. Hello, My name is William. Hi, I'm Ben. First of all, I want to say that this is going to sound weird, but I promise you I'm not crazy or, like a psycho or anything like that, but, I have a job opportunity if you are interested. Thank you, but I already have a job. Well, this one is easy, and you can do it on your own. It will take about 15 minutes of your time and I only need it done once a month. I will pay you $1,000 each time for the job and to keep it between you and I. What is the job? Come back tomorrow at 5 and I will show you. My curiosity was practically dancing on the way back to my house. $1,000 a month is a lot for a college student, and 5 minutes? What could it be? My imagination ran wild, but I had absolutely no clue what it could be. The next day came back at 5 on the dot. But this time I drove. I guess somehow the sense of my car being there made me feel a little safer, and also I came wearing regular clothes and not running gear, which gave me the added bonus of concealing a knife. I still was not 100% sure of this man or his intentions. He was already waiting for me outside, watering his garden, when he saw me. "Hey, Ben, glad you decided to show up. Come on in and I will tell you all about the job." Hesitantly I followed behind him. The house itself looked old but not dilapidated. It was wooden, stained with years' worth of age, but the front door was unusual in that it did not match the house. It looked modern. The inside was a surprise as well. Everything was modern, from the large thin flat screen on the wall, to the couches, the glass coffee table, the kitchen with a rather large marble island. It was pretty nice. "Would you like a drink?" "I have a lot of options. No thank you. Honestly, I would just like to know the job." "Understandable, come on, I will show you." And with that he walks outside and towards the backyard. We walk into the woods for quite some time and I start feeling uneasy about this. He never turns around or says anything. After a while I see it. About 10 feet in front of me there is a clearing in the woods, and in it is what appears to be a structure of some sort. It is perfectly rectangular and looked to be completely made out of steel and concrete. As I got closer I stopped in my tracks. On the front of the door was an enormous door latch made out of solid steel. It had one of those locks where there is one keyhole. I put my hand in my pocket on the knife when he turned around and said, I know, this looks bad, I know, but trust me, okay? Trust me. I am going to open up this door, okay? Then I will go inside. All you have to do is close the latch and lock the lock. That is it. Then tomorrow morning come back and open it. Can you do that? With a puzzled look on my face I nodded. He then slowly put his hand in his pocket and pulled out a plastic bag and threw it to me. Inside was what looked to be $100 bills and a key. He then opened the door, just slightly to squeeze in, almost to conceal what was inside, then closed it behind him. I cautiously walked up to the door, then locked the padlock. The next morning I drove once again to the house and walked the path to the structure. I unlocked the padlock and lifted the latch, then stepped back. The door opened and William stepped out slowly, looking exactly the same as the night before. There was something about his face that was different though, almost like a sadness or like he was thinking about something very hard. The look quickly faded and he smiled at me, thanked me, and said he would call a few days ahead of time to let me know when I would do it again. This continued throughout most of my time in college. He would text me a date, I would come over and lock him in the massive structure, then let him out the next morning. It was incredibly odd to say the least, but I never questioned why and never told anyone. I questioned it myself all the time. Over time we began to talk more and I learned more about each other. Oftentimes we would have a Guinness before I locked him in that structure. He was originally from New York City but moved after his wife was killed in a car accident. He said he wanted to move way out in the country because the city reminded him too much about his wife. It was actually quite nice talking to him. He had a genuine sense of humor and seemed interested in my life and studies. He was very intelligent and recommended me various books which he let me borrow. I even met him once to grab a drink and catch an exhibit at a museum. I guess you could say we had become friends. Everything was going as usual and everything was fine until the accident. I just remember getting hit. After that it's a blur. When I woke up my parents were there and I knew it was bad. A drunk driver had T-boned me and I had sustained severe injuries, but thankfully nothing life-threatening. 2 days after, I looked at my phone and noticed I had a text from William Tuesday the 4th. And another, "Hey Ben, are you on the way?" And another on the night of Tuesday the 4th around midnight. "Hey Ben, I just want to say thank you for what you have done for me. It was really good getting to know you and I hope you succeed in everything you do. All the books are yours, they are at Dave's house, William." I did not know what to think. The first thing I did was drive over to Dave's house, our mutual friend from the surrounding area who worked at the lone gas station nearby. I asked him what happened and he said that William just went missing. The police could not find him, and they even put together a group of the locals to look for him, but there was absolutely no trace. I had an idea where he could be. It was 9 p.m. when I arrived at his house. There was police tape in front of the door. Out in the country at night, especially on a road like this, it gets very dark. I have one of those infomercial flashlights, the extremely bright ones, and that helped ease my tension. As I walked the path and got closer and closer to the structure, I noticed that the door was open like I had suspected. I slowly entered the room expecting to see William's dead body, but to my surprise it was completely empty. Inside the room there were a few things I noticed immediately. There was a window in the back that was only covered with thick steel bars about waist height, and next to it was a chair. There was a desk with a composition book on it. There was a table with a set of headphones and various books on it. And there was a shelf with more books, canned food, and a large gallon jug of water. As I scanned the room, something immediately caught me off guard. The door also had a lock on the inside just like the one on the outside. I thought to myself, why would he need me if he could lock it on the inside? I sat at his desk and looked at the composition book, which simply had the words Emily written in black ink on the cover. In the front of the book were several pictures of William and who I assumed to be his deceased wife, Emily. She was a very beautiful woman, tall, dark hair, comforting eyes. The first couple of pages were just recollections of how they met, travels that went on, things that she said that he always remembered. Flipping through and reading, I could tell that he loved her immensely, and missed her every day. Near the end he discussed her death, and the funeral. Then I noticed that a few pages had been ripped out. It looked to be 4 pages missing. And on the last page was this entry: November 7, 2006. I stood outside and I waited, pointing my flashlight in every direction looking. It was midnight and I had done everything they said, everything. Their words still fresh in my head. Every day there is a full moon, she will come to you. But you have to be here. You can be with her again, but you have to be like her. Was I insane to think a person could be brought back from the dead? It's crazy. But I needed to see her, more than anything else in the world. Then I heard it. Steps in the woods, leaves being crunched by footsteps slowly walking towards me. Then I heard her voice. William, where are you? It couldn't be, it sounded just like her. I know I asked for this, but a part of me was not expecting it. William, I can't see you, honey. As figure approached me and as I raised my flashlight and a feeling of dread took over. Her feet were dirty and her legs bloody with flesh hanging on like loose threads. The dress she was wearing was ripped in half, vertically exposing half of her naked body with skin hanging and organs spilling out of a hole in her side. And her face. Her eyes were the same, but they were yellow. Her lower jaw was barely hanging on, she had only half of her hair and I could see skull on one side. But her voice was exactly the same. William, I've missed you so much. I slowly backed up in horror and she looked surprised, almost shocked. William, what's wrong? It's me, it's really me. Remember Italy, the time we got caught in the rain in New York? Jennifer and Craig's wedding when I caught the bouquet, remember? It was her. But it wasn't. I ran inside the house and locked the door behind me. After a while of her asking me to open the door and she started banging on the door. William, it's me. Open this fucking door. I know you loved me. Open this fucking door. Then from some unknown source she managed to gather enough strength to tear down the door with her bare hands, her face writhing with anger. I ran out the back door, got into my car and drove off, not even looking in the rearview mirror. The next morning when I returned, nothing seemed out of the ordinary besides the door. All I kept thinking about was her voice, and how good it was to hear her talk about old times. But I was terrified. Terrified of her, and the notion of being like her. What would that entail? Death most certainly, then a life of being, whatever she was. Then I had a plan. I put the ad on Craigslist for a more than reasonable offer. 2 men replied and I told them if they did not tell anyone about this or ask any questions I would double their salary. They did an exceptional job and did it quickly. I think I heard one of them talking, saying he thinks it's a bomb shelter, which was fine by me. When the next full moon came, I went inside and locked the door. Then, 5 minutes past midnight, I heard her voice. "William, William, where are you?" "Emily, I'm here," I said through the bars of the window. "William, what is this?" "Can we just talk?" I said. And that is how it went. Every night of the day of a full moon I talked to my wife. How, I don't know and do not wish to know. But every night I would sit by that window and close my eyes and we talked about old times, and it made me happy. But as the morning came closer and closer each time, she would get violently angry, banging on the door and screaming to let her in, but I just could not. I loved Emily more than being alive, but this was not her. Or was it? I do not know what it is, maybe my longing for her in any way, or the tiny possibility of happiness, but slowly over time I have considered opening that door. Last night I actually put the key into the lock and was about to turn it. I fear one day, and one day soon, I will open that door. I have to do something about that. Story 6, Avery's Halloween Costume. Morrison and Avery were taken on the last day of September, the year of our Lord 2017. As the sheriff of a town that had 20 trees for every person, to say we lived in a rural county would be an understatement. Gross understatement. And so goes with quaint, quiet villages. This sort of thing does not happen ever. Their mother called me sobbing, "Sheriff, you got to help me find little Maury and little Avery." Saying their names made her sob even harder. I could barely understand what she was saying. "You see, you just got to." I didn't know her well, but I knew her mom some. Hell, I knew just about someone from every family here. And if I'm lying, which I don't quite think I am, I knew someone who knew someone from that family. We were all connected. One people, one town, one heart. I felt like I knew them all. And with that same feeling, unity, we took to looking for her boys. The idea that one of my own, a member of my flock, we are God-fearing folk, don't you know, would take another, not just another, but an innocent. 2 boys of barely 8 and 12 years. Kidnapping? The word didn't feel right coming out of my mouth. In all my years as sheriff, I never investigated something so sinister. I've seen my fair share of violence, bar fights, domestic disputes, boyhood brawls. But nothing sinister. So, suffice it to say, the thought of kidnapping came and went like Ms. Butterfray's country double-fried chicken at the State's Fair held each October. We were only about 100 feet into the woods when my deputy began his murmuring, "Them boys have got to be here somewhere," my deputy kept saying to himself. I wanted to tell him to buckle down, but I let him get it out of his system. I wish he wouldn't think to himself aloud like this, but it was his manner of living, and my lord, is it hard to change the manner of a man, especially one as stubborn as my deputy. We spread out, 15 feet between each man, must have been 100 of us. Our own pastor, Father Joseph, led the way, cloaked in white like a beacon of God shining in the orange glow of the evening sun. He held a lantern in one hand and a cross in the other, calling out to the boys, "No one is mad at you, young sons. God forgives all. Just come home to your mama. Come out, come home, Maury, Avery." His voice carried a sing-song tone beneath the layers of trees that obscured the burning sky above, like a sermon for our weary souls and the shadows that trailed behind us. As the light gave way to a blanket of stars, so too did our hope, and patience began to flutter and vanquish. We covered as much ground as our tired bodies could. The country hills wreak havoc on the joints. No one willingly stopped looking, not until I called it. Mercer even rolled his ankle and kept up a few more minutes, wincing through the pain before his daddy draped his arm about his shoulder and walked him down the rolling countryside of our little Tennessee town. "That's it? That's all?" Ms. McCreary said, a storm of tiny fists pounding upon my chest. I pleaded with her to wait behind at the station. She would have driven the men mad, that's for sure. The stress of the whole ordeal had already ravaged her meek frame, leaving her eyes swollen from crying and fingernails jagged from gnawing. "That's not all, Mom, you have my word. I will do everything in my power, in your power. That's not what you promised before. You promised you'd find them." How could I respond to her? I did everything in my power, everything I could think of. Hell, I called upon our brothers at the firehouse, the sheriffs and their deputies from the neighboring counties, anyone and anything that had eyes and the will to look. Taken versus lost. Injured versus hurt. Crime versus misunderstanding. Did some sick bitch take our little Morrison? Our poor, adorable Avery? Who hadn't yet reached 10 years of youth? Whose cute denim overalls covered all the missing posters? Or did they stumble into a ditch and break a little limb? Did they pass out somewhere? Were they alive? I could dwell, or I could continue putting up flyers, letting the search dogs loose through the woods, and calming Ms. McCreary. So I kept it up, best I could. On day 3, my deputy confronted me. "Listen here, we should have treated this as a missing persons case from the very beginning." I barely had a cup of that magic black elixir when he strutted into my office in the uniform I personally picked out for him only 2 years ago. My wife even sewed his name to the front. Real official looking. He was as stubborn as he was arrogant. "Did you say something, boy?" He swallowed hard but stood his ground. I could appreciate his vigor, his quiet defiance, his sense of what is right. But may the Lord witness the day that I let him address me in as such a condescending temperament as he was displaying in that moment. I stood from my desk, much to his chagrin. Did he forget that I loomed over him with back straight? We were so close that he actually tilted his head back to look me in the eye, like a man. But he looked like a lost boy. We should have investigated. He stammered, desperately trying to remember what the hell he was saying, but fear took ripe hold. "Then why the hell didn't you?" I inquired in a whisper through gritted teeth. "Don't tell me the bait's rotten just because there aren't any bites. I'll start with his classmates," and he was out of my office as quickly as he came. Good heart. Good intentions. Needs to work on standing up to his father though. "Deputy Lucky," I called out to him. That made him seethe. He also hated Deputy Junior, Deputy Sonny, and Deputy Willie, which is what his mama calls him. That's what she sewed on his jacket the first time, before he threw one of his little tantrums, mini meltdowns she called them. He looked close to having another. "So what's the plan?" He didn't look at me, just stared at my chest. I put my hand on his shoulder. "You need to be even-keeled, son. If you let me rattle your chains this much, imagine what the bad guys will do to you." He knew I was right, so he drew in a deep breath, then let it out slow like his mama taught him. "That's a boy. Now tell me your plan." I was gonna start down by the school. Speak with the headmaster, the boys' teachers, his friends. You know how young'uns are liable to say whatever's on their minds. Intelligent. Poised. I wonder how he is under pressure? "Son, it pains me to say it, but start with the boy's mama, uncle, cousins. Then work your way back around. Look to see if any of them's squirming when they see you pull up a second time. You don't think. You want to investigate foul play? This is how you go about it. Matter of fact, start with Dale." He nodded in agreement. Dale was Ms. McCreary's gun-toting, hell-raising half-brother. He ran a small crew of bikers. They didn't cause our town much trouble, hanging out mostly at a tavern on the outskirts. I had half a mind to deputize the young man. I could have really used a shot like his. He brought home first place in the state fair sharpshooting competition every year until his daddy left them, him and the McCreary girl. Now, as mother of Morrison and Avery, she mourns. Anyhow, he moved out then, must have still been about 16. 10 years later and I couldn't tell that boy nothing. He wouldn't hear me then, and I doubt he will now. He would have graduated with deputy lucky had he stayed in school. Shame, really. Seeing the deputy question the boy's family was likely to cause a stir around town. But he's doing his job. I'm doing mine. Serve and protect. No one's casting judgment till we have all the answers. I still thought those boys were lost amidst the brush and the bush. Hope is a damned thing. Days went by. Nothing changed. So I paid Dale a visit myself. How goes it? I called out, walking up the gravel driveway to the trio of trailers assembled in a half-moon at the back of Dale's property. About 4 black Harleys were parked out front. A mean-looking man with teardrops under his eyes and black sunglasses peered at me from the seat of his hock. His leather vest was emblazoned with a patch that read 1%. His German shepherd sat faithfully beside him, able to tear me apart at a moment's notice. Another man raised the blinds of his trailer, revealing himself and a lovely red-haired lady on his arm. He shut the curtains after making eye contact with me. His trailer door slammed shut seconds later. Dale around? I asked, palms up to make the peace. Came to ask about the boys. The boy, Dale corrected, closing the rickety metal screen door to his trailer and wiping black grease from his hand with what once might have passed for a towel. What do you mean by that? I asked, arms folded. Ain't no way they're both alive right now, strolling through these here trees, he said, turning and facing the tree line that flooded the horizon behind the trailers. You'd be lucky to find just one at this point. His white tank top was covered in grease stains. It looked like they were repairing of their bikes before I interrupted. Do you know something I don't? That's just my guess. But, yeah, I know lots of things you don't, Sheriff. And I, unlike you, ask the right questions. But your boy? Better keep him in the office before you send him back here. Throwing round false accusations and such, he spit on the ground near my feet. My deputy never did tell me what he learned when he asked around. I was too busy with the search. I reckon you had your own search of these woods. I did. And if you found something of material value, I reckon you'd share that. Share? Now wait here just a minute. Share? Like how I shared what I told you about them aliens? Like how I shared what I knew about the federal cover-up? How do you listen to this? I asked Dale's friend, who didn't move a muscle. It wasn't the first time I heard Dale ramble about aliens or UFOs. Look. I'm not here for the conspiracy theories, Dale. We had a search team go out when your dad left. News flash, Sheriff. My father didn't fucking leave. So you can fuck right off. You did all you could, just like you're doing all you can now. Which ain't shit. Unless you have a warrant you're trespassing, and with that, Dale's man revved up his engine, drowning out my protest. I left with the motorized cacophony at my back. I remember when Dale's father left them. Hated the man for that. We played poker together some nights at the firehouse. They had a little tournament there about once a month or so. His ex-wife, Dale's mama, hated him. But from what I knew he was happily living with Ms. McCreary's and Mrs. McCreary, and he took Dale out sometimes. Bought him his first gun, if I remember correctly. Didn't seem the type to leave, no, abandon his own. I was thinking about Dale and driving aimlessly about the town, and I still had hope for finding the boys, plural, until I got the call. You're going to want to see this for yourself, Mr. Raymond, the owner of the local hardware store said. They had been searching all morning when the news made its way to me. October 13, 2017. My last full night of sleep without screaming. I expected to see a crowd, but there was only Mr. Raymond, our father, 2 of the local volunteer firemen, and my son. Father had his eyes closed, and he was praying and praying and praying, sliding each rosary bead across his fingers. Sounded like he was speaking Latin. The fireman and my son knelt before him, arms around each other. I thought I heard my son whimpering into his chest. He wasn't religious. I could smell the vomit on Mr. Raymond's breath. He looked a little greenish in the face. Come this way, he beckoned, and I followed a few dozen feet into the brush to a clearing where Mr. Raymond's leather bomber covered the upper torso and face of what looked like the body of a young boy. I didn't want to tamper with any of this, it's evidence and such and such. But I could not look upon him for one more second. None of us could. Your boy I don't think has the stomach. Well, I'm not one to talk. It's like this, see. We thought it was an animal. But the eyes, Rick. Mr. Raymond was sick again. I walked to the motionless body and knelt before it. Before I looked, I slid my hand over to where the neck would be to feel for a pulse. I expected my finger to press against bone or flesh, but once against the skin, my finger pressed into skin and jabbed through to the cold earth beneath. I looked at my hand. Red. Red all over. Confused, I lifted the jacket to see little Maury. His skin lie on the ground before me. Deflated. Red and swollen. Flayed. The teeth were still there. White teeth doomed to grin for eternity. Maury's one missing right front tooth. I recognized it from the posters. No eyes. That was the worst of it. No eyes. Two bottomless black pits where the eyes should have been. No eyes. I stared into them. No eyes. There was nothing there. God was not here. I sat Indian style and lifted what was left of the boy by his shoulders, and sat him in my lap, forgetting all protocol. The head immediately slumped back, folded over. This could have been my boy, any of our boys, I thought. This was no animal. How could it be? I asked him, the boy's limp body now cradled in my arms. Back at the station my son James continued crying softly. Broken, now. My wife Susan was giving me hell. Are you trying to break him? Is that what you meant when you said you'd make a man of him? Look at him. Look at this man you've made. And for what? You're breaking him. He isn't cut out for his, Rick, God damn it, look at me. But I couldn't. And then I heard the wailing cries of Miss McCreary as she burst into another fit of hysteria, which she was liable to do every 15 minutes or so. Her wail loomed throughout the halls of the old building, reminding me that this sheriff's headquarters, as we so nobly called it, was just a building, and the man dressed from head to toe in the uniform of a sheriff's deputy, was still just a boy. The pain of losing Miss McCreary's firstborn son was unbearable, for her, for the town, for all of us. Before Susan could tear into me again, I took her and James up in my arms and held them so close to me. I kissed each of their foreheads softly, tears marching down my cheeks in droves. Susan's nails dug into the flesh of my back before she let go, defeated, falling to her knees. I let them both fall into my waiting arms and held them tighter than I could ever remember. And we all cried with Miss McCreary for her son. The town was not the same after that. What the hell is capable of doing that? Someone yelled in the movie theater we commandeered for a town meeting. About 100 angry folks stood demanding answers. Where is the other boy? Where is Miss McCreary? Yeah. Where is she? Is she okay? Are any of us safe? What are you doing to protect us? People were uproarious from the moment I called the meeting to order. James shot around into the floor and everyone simmered down. We have been searching non-stop since we found the I paused, not wanting to say body. Morrison. No other clues, no other leads. Halloween is tomorrow and something is out there. One angry mother yelled. I hear you. We hear you, I said, looking at James. At this time, we have no reason to suspect foul play. The evidence doesn't support that. No fucking clue how to do your goddamned jobs, someone yelled. The rabble-rousing started again. James only had to raise his gun to stop it this time. Cancel Halloween. Someone else suggested there is no reason why the children should not go on trick-or-treating tomorrow as usual. I encourage, as I have each and every year, a parent chaperone. We will authorize a number of volunteers to monitor and patrol the streets for this one night, and we will set a curfew at midnight to help control the shenanigans. Form a line to my left if you'd like to volunteer. Damn near the entire room lined up. The next day the town appeared calm on the surface, but there was tension, for sure. The people hastily decorated, pumpkins were carved into jack-o'-lanterns, white plastic skulls hung from tree branches, straw was stuffed into old denim to make straw men sitting on bales of hay. Kids took to the streets earlier than usual, which I expected. We received far fewer calls about teenagers with eggs and toilet paper. We got a few, but far fewer than in years past. I barely gave the troublemakers a talking to. Be safe, I bellowed at them before releasing them back into the dread of night. Halloween looked normal, but the town was on edge. The trick-or-treaters were already heading home when I got a call from Dale himself. Well, I never thought I'd see the day, I said softly to myself as I let the Bluetooth of my pickup take the call. Sheriff, come to the tavern. You know the place. And tell me why your deputy has his gun pointed at my head. The line went dead. I nearly ran over one of the little trick-or-treaters as I sped over to the biker bar. I announced myself and proceeded into the bar with gun drawn. Dale? I called out. No response. Inside, the bar was deserted. The floor was sticky and the smell of spilled beer penetrated my nostrils. Not a soul loitered where loud and rowdy were the norm. I took the first step downstairs near the back of the bar. I could see dim light emanating from a solitary light bulb, dangling from its cord near the staircase. Dale? I called out again. Down here, Sheriff. Nice and slow. I took the next step with gun drawn, but pointed at the ground. The room was about 20 feet wide in any direction, mostly used for storage. My son Deputy James stood at one end of the room, shotgun pointed at Dale. Dale stood at the other end of the room with a knife to the neck of a small body, the face concealed by a white sheet, smeared with dabs of red beneath. Two of Dale's men flanked him on either side, guns pointed back at James. Okay, let's just calm down everybody. James, why don't you go ahead and lower your weapon first? Dale's got Avery. This ain't Avery. Then tell us why you got a little kid in the basement of your bar, Dale. This ain't fucking Avery. Dale barked back. His men took a step towards James. Okay, I tried again after their exchange. Everybody hold your horses. How did? My stomach lurched as I processed the guns pointed at my son, but I kept my nerve. How did we get here? We got to patrolling the neighborhood, just like you said. Looking for anything suspicious. Anything out of the ordinary. Everything was mostly fine. Even the hooligans lightened up some. When we came onto this thing. The man to Dale's right spit on the ground. He continued, first off, little kids posed to have chaperones today. This bugger's walking around by himself, so I approach. That's when I notice it. He ain't walking right. He walking mighty funny, see? Like imitating what a boy walks like. I can't explain it. Sometimes tiptoeing. Sometimes feet turned in. Sometimes turned out. Unnatural. Then, I swear to God in almighty heaven above, I saw it glide. I saw it gliding when I called Dale, his man added. But what was unholy was the sound. What's your name? I asked. Simple enough. Had a candy bar in my hand too. That was it. Ask either of them. They'll tell you. I was cordial. Formal even. What's your name? It ain't human. Bullshit. James said. I saw them take the boy, toss him in the back of their pickup, and come here. Bullshit? Then you fucking ask him? You didn't wonder why he ain't moving or squirming or nothing? Not crying? That's normal. Simple. It's shock. Right, Avery? Are you scared? My son asked the child. At first, the child didn't move. But then slowly its head crept up, then down. Looks human to me. What's strange about that? I asked Dale. Ask him to say something. Dale yelled, pressing the knife against its neck. You wanna tell us your name, little guy? I asked. There was no sound at first, but Dale pressed the blade deeper. Dale, goddammit, he's a little boy. Go on then, Dale said, tell them. What came out of the child's mouth sounded like it could have been Avery, but it was just garbled sounds and syllables. My stomach dropped. Care to repeat that nonsense? Dale asked. After a pause, it spoke again, but no human language was heard. Take off the sheet, my son said, still pointing the gun at Dale. Dale did so quickly, unveiling the now quivering boy without hesitation, then placed the knife back at the boy's throat. The boy clutched at Dale's hands. His breathing was sporadic, forced you might say. The boy wore the mask of a smiling blonde boy with cutouts for the eyes and mouth, like the cheap plastic masks with the flimsy string strap the Quick Mart sells for a quarter every autumn. Jesus, is he Avery? It's Avery's body, but it's not Avery, Dale said. I think I know my nephew. Jesus, Dale. No kids. Ain't that an outlaw rule? Now one of the guns was pointed at me. The boy began to cry. Streams of thick red poured from the eye holes and the bottom of the mask. Tensions flared. How's that mask staying on? Goddamn staples, Dale answered. Dale, you sick son of a bitch. My son cocked his shotgun. The two men beside Dale cocked their pistols. You think I did this? When you saw me take it, you chased me down here. I would never do this. Not to child. Not to anyone. This ain't Avery, Dale explained, turning to me. I bet you wish you'd believed me when I told you about Paw, when I told you how they come and get me. I bet you wish you could go back, but you can't. We can never go back. Dale was crying now. Now is all we got. This ain't Avery. The child began to shake. I could not begin to imagine the trauma he's endured. Torture. Kidnapping. These are thick fucking staples. From a staple gun. We found it in its trick-or-treat pillowcase. Avery, Avery. Listen, honey. Are you scared? Avery nodded again. Say your fucking name. Dale pressed the blade into the boy's neck, this time drawing blood. It let out a low bellow, not the type of high-pitched scream a child makes. Can you remove the mask? I asked, not sure if I should point the gun at Dale or keep it cocked and pointed at the floor. Not without surgical tools, my son responded. I'll remove it, Dale said, prying the bottom of the knife in between the staples of the mask and lifting forward. He pulled his knife back to pry out the staple, but the boy only bellowed louder. You're hurting him. My son approached with his gun. The two men raised their guns at James's head. It was hard to believe. Dale, what was he even saying? Not human? Looking at this innocent child in little blue denim overalls and yellow t-shirt. And yet, the sounds were unlike any I ever heard. With everyone looking at the screaming child, I silently approached and masterfully disarmed one man with gun pressed to his temple while he was distracted, pointing both guns at the other man. Knowing he'd been had, he wisely lowered his weapon. Dale, that's enough now, I commanded. I pointed both guns at him. My son approached with his shotgun. Dale. My son said again, pointing the shotgun up. Come on, Dale. Do the right thing here. Dale dropped the knife and pulled on the bottom of the mask with both hands with everything he had, trying desperately to pry off the mask near the boy's chin. The boy's feet were dangling as Dale held him by the face. The boy let out a horrible shriek. An unbearable screaming noise. I never heard a sound like that come out of a boy, come out of anything. I covered my ear with one hand, gun pointed up, and pointed the other gun at Dale, my other ear pressed into my shoulder. When the screaming reached another octave, I fell to my knees, pressing both hands against my ears. I heard it before I realized it happened. My son was always stubborn. Now, under pressure, he refused to stand down. That's when James shot Dale with the shotgun. No. I hollered at him, knocking the shotgun to the floor. But the damage was done. The sound was deafening. We all fell to the ground except Dale, who was forced up into the wall. He slumped against some boxes against the wall, touching his stomach and looking at the blood on his fingers, eyes staring up blankly for God. The force of the gunshot ripped through his body, spraying blood everywhere and leaving 6 smoking bullet holes in his shoulder and arm. But it was also the force needed to rip the mask from the child's face. The staples ripped part of the skin away, leaving gashes of dark red dashed lines in an oval around the boy's face. As if that were not unnerving enough, the skin pulled away from the top of the boy's skull. The skin around the boy's forehead, eyes, and nose should have been tight and taut. But it was not. It hung loosely. Bulging blue eyes darted from under the sagging skin. He reached up to his forehead and held the skin back, trying to keep it in place. I got to my knees and reached forward, pulling the skin from the bridge of his nose. The skin pulled apart from the perforations where the staples pierced the boy's chin. James's breathing grew louder and labored as Avery's face hung limply from my fingers. I expected the mask to come off, not Avery's entire face. Dale tried to say something, but only blood gurgled from his lips. I could hear footsteps at the top of the stairs, but I did not dare take my eyes off the creature. It hissed at me, eyes angry and scared. Dale was right. What stared back was not Avery. It was another face. Humanoid. Oversized eyes popped from the skull that was too small to be human. It had no nose. I could see the white of the skull where the blood refused to pool. There was a deep orifice where the nose should be. Blood sputtered from this vertical slit. Sharp, jagged teeth protruded from thin black lips. Its black tongue flickered and licked the outside of its mouth. It was covered in Avery's blood. My son rocked quietly back and forth. The other men stared in disbelief at the thing that wore Avery's body as its Halloween costume. It was still trying to fool us by picking up parts of the boy's face and placing them where they should have been. "Avery?" Ms. McCreary asked from behind me. I slowly turned to see the tears streaming down her tired cheeks, her son's face still dangling from my fingers. She set her eyes upon the humanoid thing wearing her son's skin and then at her son's face in my hands. The thing still wore the blue denim overalls Avery wore in the missing posters we posted around town. Ms. McCreary let out a scream that still, to this day, shakes me to my core. The humanoid creature darted out from between my legs, managing to shake Avery's body free, and its bloody form scurried up the stairs on all fours, leaving its husk behind. Avery's body slipped away from the thing's tiny torso. It had the shape of a boy, but it was black and bloody, not of our world. Up the stairs it went, two at a time, and out the front door. Ms. McCreary fainted. I looked from Ms. McCreary to my son to the bloodied mess of a carcass that once was Avery before us, and knew things would never be all right again. Not with that thing roaming free. Dale would survive that night, but a bit of his sanity was taken by the creature. I couldn't blame him. He had been right. Right about it not being Avery. Right about being taken those years ago. Probably right about his paw, too. I retired soon after that. James is sheriff now. The town doesn't celebrate Halloween anymore. Too much pain that day. But if you celebrate the Day of the Dead, stay with watchful eye. If you ever see a small child in a white sheet on Halloween, be sure it isn't gliding up the steps to your front door. The thing that pretended to be Avery still roams about our rolling hills, awaiting its chance to become one of us, even if just for a night. Waiting for another Halloween, biding its time when it can finally walk amongst us again. Story 7, My Twin Brother. Me and my twin brother Tommy were inseparable from the moment we were born. We did everything together, from sharing a cot, taking a bath, we even took our first steps at the same time. As we grew older we remained just as inseparable. We found it difficult to make friends with other kids as they just didn't connect in the same way me and Tommy did. Therefore it was no surprise that the kids at school started to bully us. At home things weren't that much better. I would never say I had bad parents, in fact they would do anything for me, but that was the problem. I was their favorite child. They rarely acknowledged Tommy and this caused me to resent them. Why couldn't they treat Tommy how they treat me? The night of our 12th birthday something in Tommy snapped. I seen something inside him break as my parents presented me with my birthday cake whilst yet again excluding him. Tommy stormed off upstairs to our bedroom with me quickly at his heels. I drifted off to sleep that night to the sound of next door's dog yapping again. Oh how I wished it would shut up. That night was the first time Tommy and I were ever apart. I have always been a heavy sleeper so barely registered the door open and close as Tommy snuck out that night. I awoke the next morning to a scream coming from outside. Our next door neighbor Mrs. Frank had gone outside to feed her Labrador Arthur to find he had been sliced open from top to bottom, his organs strewn all over the garden. Arthur was the first victim. It was a few days later when I found the bloody clothes hidden in a bag at the back of the wardrobe. I know I should have told my parents right there and then, but Tommy told me if I told anyone he would be taken away. We had never been apart, I couldn't be without Tommy, so I stayed quiet. I should have said something. I could have saved them. The following weeks at school were much the same as usual, me and Tommy together. Nobody wanted to be friends with the weird kids. It was mainly just name-calling and nasty comments, but James had made it his personal mission to make our lives a misery over the last 2 years. He was a year older and huge for his age. He was only 13 but stood at 6 foot tall and must have weighed 15 stone. He had started shaving a year earlier. He had no problem in handling the two of us. James was only ever physically violent to me. He enjoyed making Tommy watch as he beat me. What was Tommy meant to do to help anyways? He couldn't stand up to James. Right at the end of the school year, James delivered his worst beating yet. Knowing it would be 6 weeks before he saw me again, he made sure to leave this mark. As he rained kicks into me as I lay curled up on the floor, I seen the rage on Tommy's face. That night Tommy snuck off for a second time. The news reports described the scene as horrific. A family of 3 had been murdered. An intruder had snuck in through an open window and slit the father's throat as he dozed in his armchair in front of the TV. The mother was next, a single stab wound through the heart as she slept in bed. Finally James. James was unrecognizable. Blood covered the entire room, and parts of him littered the floor. I knew it was Tommy. The police never even thought to look into the possibility a 12-year-old child could commit such crimes, therefore Tommy was never a suspect. I know I should have said something. What Tommy did was horrific, but Tommy made me promise not to say anything or he would be taken away. I couldn't lose Tommy. After James's murder, the bullying at school stopped. People whispered nervously as we walked past, but nobody dared hit us or call us names. The rumor was that I had killed James in a rage after the last beating. Of course no teachers or parents would believe them. It was just kids and their imaginations. Our 13th birthday rolled around. As usual, my parents had bought me presents and presented me with my cake and shunned Tommy. I could see the devastation across Tommy's face again. Why can't they love Tommy like they love me? Tommy stormed off upstairs and I grabbed 2 plates of cake and hurried up after him. I lay down in bed with Tommy and we cried together until I fell asleep. I awoke in the early hours of the morning to find Tommy was gone. I hurried out of the bedroom to find him. There were bloody handprints on the walls and footprints on the stairs. I ran down the stairs and into the living room where I found my mother and father dead, their blood pooled together on the carpet. Tommy was gone. I rang the police. It was time I finally told them about Tommy. When the police arrived, I was instantly arrested. My hands and feet covered in blood, the footprints trailing up and down the stairs following my every move. Tommy was never born, he had died in the womb. Story 8, I'm a good mother. Word can't explain how it feels to lose a child. When you first give birth and the nurse hands you that little bundle of joy for the first time, you just look down at its innocent eyes and smile. You never think about what would happen if your child were taken from you. The very thought of it sends shock waves of pain through your body. I still remember the day that we lost Riley. The doctor walked out to the waiting room, a look of absolute defeat on her face. She didn't even have to say anything for me to understand. But, when she finally croaked out the first words, we did everything we could. I absolutely lost it. Riley was born 7 years ago in our small town. He was our first child and boy, did he come fast. I was in labor for a total of 4 hours before he came into this world. But, that's how Riley always lived his life, fast. The very second I laid eyes on him, I knew that I would do absolutely to protect him. When Riley was 2, he fell and bumped his head on the coffee table. I was in hysterics as we rushed him to the emergency room, head busted open and bleeding over me. They stitched him up in an hour and told me it was no big deal. I never wanted to feel fear like that again. Any mother will tell you that when something happens to your baby, it's like time stops. Seconds feel like hours, all you can focus on is getting your child help. When Riley was 5, we discovered his peanut allergy. He was in Sunday school, enjoying snack time when a child beside him opened up a pack of peanut butter crackers. Riley got one whiff and his throat began to close up. My husband and I rushed him to the emergency room, where he was given epinephrine and antihistamines. He was fine to go home the next morning, but the fear in my heart lingered on. I was cautious every single day about what Riley and the people around him ate. It wasn't something I worried about, it was so much more than that. It was something I literally obsessed about. I never wanted to feel that way ever again. As I mentioned before, I would do absolutely anything to protect him. I was at work when I got the call that Riley was having an allergic reaction at school. I yelled instructions about EpiPens over the phone as I ran out to my car. The school nurse already knew what to do, obviously, but I wanted to make absolute sure. I called my husband on the way to the hospital and we both met there. When we arrived, we were forced into a waiting room, our son's condition remaining unknown to us. We sat for hours. My anxiety increased and increased as time went on. My husband was always calmer than I in these situations. He kept reassuring me that the school had done everything right and Riley would be okay. Death from anaphylaxis was rare, less than 1% of people die from it. I took a few deep breaths and relaxed a bit. He was right, everything would be fine. That's when the doctor came out and delivered the bad news. I was devastated. I fell to the floor, screaming. People looked at me like I was crazy, but the mothers in the room showed sympathy. They knew the pain I was feeling. We went home in silence. We stayed that way for a few days. Riley's backpack and lunchbox stayed packed in the kitchen. I couldn't bear to touch it. We put our son in the ground later that week. A few days later, my husband returned to work. How did people continue their lives? My world had crumbled apart and I would never recover. Eventually, Riley's lunchbox began to stink, so I decided that I needed to clean it. Perhaps it would be therapeutic. I was beginning to feel a lot of anger about his death. What idiot had packed peanut butter in their child's lunch? We'd sent out the letters before school started. Emails constantly reminding them about Riley's severe allergies. People just don't give a shit if it isn't their kid and I knew that. But they took my son away from me with their selfishness. And I was pissed about it. I was just about to grab my laptop and email every goddamn parent in Riley's grade that they were all selfish pricks when the horrid smell brought me back to reality. I sighed as I unzipped his lunchbox and started pulling out the contents. The carton of chocolate milk was way past rotted. It smelled absolutely horrendous. The chips were soft and mushy as they crumbled in the plastic baggie. Last was Riley's sandwich. There is this wonderful stuff I suggest for family and friends of peanut allergy sufferers. It's called Wow Butter. It is made from soy and while it isn't an exact replica of true peanut butter, it's pretty damn close. Slap it on a sandwich with some jelly and you'd never know the difference, other than the smell being slightly different. The bread was molded and the jelly was oozing out the sides. A small bite was taken out of the sandwich. It must have been the only thing he was able to eat before he had his reaction. As I was throwing his lunch in the outside bin, since it was far too rancid to be inside, I caught a whiff of something. It was something that I hadn't smelled in the 2 years since we found out about Riley's allergy, peanut butter. I immediately looked in the bin for anything, but it was empty, save for the contents of his lunch I'd just thrown in there. I slowly reached down, picking up the moldy sandwich. I held it to my nose and sniffed deeply. Underneath the absolute disgusting smell of mold and rotting milk, I smelled the peanut butter once more. I ripped open the bag, tearing the sandwich out. I pulled apart the bread and sniffed again. There was peanut butter on Riley's sandwich. 1,000 thoughts ran through my head. Was this someone's idea of a prank? They had swapped my son's lunch for this one? Or perhaps it was merely an accident and Riley had picked up another student's sandwich instead of his own at the lunch table? I threw the sandwich pack into the bin, tears falling freely down my cheeks. One bite of this sandwich had ripped my son away from me. One bite. I went back inside and saw down at the kitchen table. Again, the thought of sending a nasty email to the other parents crossed my mind, but something in my gut told me to wait. I stood up and walked over to the pantry, opening it and grabbing the jar of Wow Butter off the shelf. Was it a manufacturing mistake? No, surely not. The company prided themselves on being 100% nut-free. They wouldn't have even had the chance for any cross-contamination. I set the jar back on the shelf and sighed. Then, something caught my eye from the back of the top shelf. I moved the boxes of pasta and endless canned goods out of the way. My eyes landed on one fairly full jar of peanut butter. Immediately, I assumed that I had forgotten to throw it out when we cleaned out the kitchen 2 years ago. I pulled it out and looked at it. Only a small amount was taken from the jar, it was all but full. After 2 years, though, it was probably long past its expiration date. That stuff only keeps a few months once open. The expiration date was still a year away, which I thought was weird. I sat back down at my laptop and began to do some research. Peanut butter only lasts a few months before it starts to separate, the oil pooling at the top. Curious, I opened the jar. It was not separated, meaning it had been recently opened. I could feel my heart in my throat as my mind raced. I looked around the kitchen before my eyes stopped on the nanny cam I had installed a few months earlier. As I pulled up the feed on my phone, my hands shook violently. I almost couldn't type in the password to the app. I hadn't told anyone, not even my husband, about the nanny cam because I'd actually set it up to see if he was screwing our 19-year-old babysitter. But now, that seemed like the worst of my problems. I pulled up the feed for that morning, about when we would have made his lunch, and pressed play. I watched in horror as my husband looked around before walking over to the pantry. He moved all the boxes and cans aside and pulled a fresh jar of peanut butter from the shelf. I watched as he put it on our son's sandwich with the same strawberry jelly we always used. He put the jar back in its hiding spot and made the rest of Riley's lunch without pause. I began hyperventilating and threw up in the kitchen sink. Our son was gone because his father had murdered him. He had planned this all out and then had the nerve to sit in the hospital with me and reassure me that it would be okay. I wondered back to all the times Riley had been hurt in the past. What if my husband was involved in all of it? I turned off the app and placed the jar back in its hiding spot in the pantry. I moved everything back to where it was and put my son's lunchbox back in his bag, like I'd never touched it. I sat down on the couch and plotted, waiting for my husband to get home from work. I prepared dinner for him like nothing was wrong. He was relieved to see me in a more upbeat mood that night. I fixed him his favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs. Well, I added a personal touch. I am actually a scientist, so I have access to plenty of different chemicals. It was a bit hard to get my hands on in such short notice, but I managed to get my hands on some cyanide capsules. It wasn't hard to sprinkle them on underneath the Parmesan cheese. We sat down to eat and I smiled for the first time since my baby boy died. I even laughed as I watched his father begin to choke on his dinner. I continued to eat as my husband grasped for me, blood and vomit pooling in his mouth. He dropped to the floor in convulsions as I finished my last meatball and stood to put my dirty plate in the sink. Finally, his breaths became shallow until he took his last. I decided to watch the rest of the nanny cam footage, to find out what else I could before I was inevitably thrown in prison for life. My suspicions turned out to be true. He was screwing the babysitter. Not only that, but it recorded a conversation about 2 weeks earlier between her and my husband. I'm not sure exactly what was said, but I was able to make out a pregnancy test in her hand. I suspect that is why he thought he needed to take this route, and perhaps I would have been next. I may not have been able to protect my son while he was still alive, but I sure as hell was able to get revenge. And that's what being a good mother is all about. Story 9, you forgot to look up here. Did you ever feel the night watching you? Did you ever feel the need to cover your feet with the blanket for no reason, even when it's not cold out? Did you ever turn over to your side while trying to sleep because you feel something watching you from your dark ceiling? Do you think there is someone with you in your room right now, a movement at the corner of your eye, a soft breath on the back of your neck, a silent whisper, saying your name, calling you from the shadows. I wake up startled and sweating, breathing heavily. My shirt is drenched and I am soaking wet. I am in my bed and my room is all dark save the soft light of my phone's notification LED blinking gently in the darkness. I guess I woke up to its buzz. I cleaned the sweat off my brow as I try to recollect my thoughts. I think my fever broke. I was on the bed for the last 3 days. My parents were really concerned. It hit me so suddenly. It started when we moved into our new house a week ago. I think it's all the moving and helping with organizing the stuff that tired me out. I felt weak and sore everywhere for the first few days, and then suddenly I just collapsed. The last thing I remember is the doctor and my parents looking down on me, perplexed and worried. I stood up, pulling my shirt off my sweaty body and use it to wipe myself. I squint as I try to make out my surroundings. I didn't get enough time to know the house properly. The only time I saw it all was when I was moving the stuff in. It seems the power is gone. I walked around my bed and grabbing my phone I turned on the flashlight on it. There seems to be just one unread message on my lock screen. I ignored it for now as my bladder seems to be in a rush. I opened my door, walking out of my room into the dark corridor that takes me to the living room on the right and the balcony on the left. My parents' bedroom is upstairs. I quickly crossed the dark corridor, and just before the balcony on the left I opened the door to the washroom and started relieving myself. After I am done I washed my face, and just as I was about to open the door I heard a soft knock on it. I paused for a second and opened the door, hoping to one of my parents, but there is no one. I shook my head thinking I was just hearing things, still being weak from the fever, and started to walk down the corridor and back to my room. I stood before my door looking at my phone so I could see the text while holding the doorknob. And just as I started to twist it open I had another knock on the door from inside my room. This time twice. I locked my phone, looking up startled, squinting at the door. I shone the light from my phone across the corridor only to find it empty. I rubbed my forehead trying to think if I really heard what I heard or if I am just imagining things. I took a deep breath, holding my phone tightly, and with quivering fingers I twisted the doorknob, opening the door. I shone my light into my room on all corners. There was just my stuff, nothing else. I walked over and jumped on my bed. My heart was racing. I am sweating again. I need to check under my bed. I braved myself as I lowered my phone under my bed, and lifting the sheets I bent down slowly, with my knees on the bed. I keep my eyes closed as I feel the hairs on my neck stand straight, and I open my eyes suddenly. There is nothing down there. Just some unpacked box. With a sigh of relief I sat back on the bed. I took a deep breath and thought I was hallucinating or something as I lie back down on my bed. I put my phone beside me and closed my eyes to sleep, still feeling weak. I opened my eyes as my phone buzzed beside me. It buzzed silently, thrice. I remember about the message on my lock screen and flipped my phone, looking at the screen to find the same message waiting on the screen. I unlocked my phone and opened the message. It said, "You forgot to look up here." I threw my phone away, started and did feel away at my feed, face up, its screen blazing in the dark, shining light over the corner and the ceiling. As my breathing quickened and I pulled my feet to me, something thick, dark and slimy, like tar and foul-smelling, started to drip over my phone. It started smelling rancid like piss all of a sudden. I feel eyes on me, watching me. The hairs all over my body stood on the end as I moved my eyes along the dripping dark pillar, only to find a pair of horrifying eyes, yellow like piss and nothing like anything natural, looking back at me. The creature's limbs were irregular and jagged as if they were broken over, and its nails bled unhealthy pus. I leapt back and started to scream, only to hear silence coming from my throat. I could see its jagged teeth as it smiled through putrid lips while it extended a long broken finger to touch me. I felt the muscles in my throat rip and tear as I shrieked for help, but there's nothing but silence and darkness which is rapidly filling the room. I looked into the yellow hellish eyes as the creature shrieked and laughed, the sound raking at me like a million razors. Its filthy fingers dig into my skin as I screamed louder, and darkness engulfed me as it said my name. I wake up startled and sweating, breathing heavily. My shirt is drenched and I am soaking wet. I am in my bed and my room is all dark save the soft light of my phone's notification LED blinking gently in the darkness. I guess I woke up to its buzz. I was holding my throat as I woke up, but I didn't know why. I was having a dream or some nightmare. I turned my phone over and there is a single unread message on the lock screen. As I started to unlock my phone to see it, I heard a soft knock on my door. Story 10, it just feels so good. Have you ever been so curious that you just take things too far? I just wanted to know how it felt. The first time was such a rush, but now it's like chasing a high I can't seem to feel again. I grew up in a shitty household. My mom was never there, and when she was completely intoxicated and aggressive. I begged to live anywhere else. Something about being told you can't break away from your childhood hell just breaks something in you. I know I am not normal or good for society, but I fake it very well. You would never know that I do what I do from first glance. Hell, there are people who have known me their entire lives and have no idea who or what I really am. It's peaceful this way. You all see me as a young, independent and ambitious woman with pale skin, deep blue eyes and dirty blonde hair. You all are naive and blind. The first time. It was absolute magic. I had always wondered how intense the rush would feel, but when it actually happened, it was intoxicating. It was like taking all the meth and heroin that you possibly could take at one time, but you weren't the one dying at the end of the high. He made it so easy. We met at a bar. I was dressed in a white see-through top and dark shredded jeans. I had just bought a new pair of fuck me pumps that would later become so handy. He was dressed kind of rugged. He had dark, curly hair and these big, beautiful brown eyes you could just get lost in. It's a shame I was already too lost. He stood tall and slender, much taller than me, but that made it even more challenging and worth it. I have always been able to hold my liquor well, but he, on the other hand, was not. It probably didn't help that I had slipped something into his drink. He seemed to really be enjoying every moment of the evening though, which made it even more enticing. As the night started to wind down around 2:30 a.m., we decided to head to a hotel room I had previously paid for. I suggested we take the alleyways to the back of the hotel. He was honestly too drunk to care. All he wanted was to grab me and kiss me over and over. It made me laugh thinking about all the things I was going to do to him, but he thought it was a more cute and playful laugh. As we strolled the alley, stumbled through the alley to the back entrance of the hotel, we took the back door of the hotel to get inside. I knew the back entrance well thanks to my sister who worked at one of the shops inside the hotel. We stumbled through the long hall past the kitchens and back entrances of the dining area until we reached the only employee elevator. We took it to the 4th floor. After pulling him by the hand as he supported himself with the wall the last couple steps to the room, I took out my card key and opened the door. He stumbled past me trying to make it to the bed, but on his way in, I grabbed my taser and hit him with some voltage. That's when the rush started. I could feel my endorphins and adrenaline kicking in. The feeling was so intense and I just didn't want it to end. The hotel room was already set up so that cleanup would be easy. I mean, with all the shows about murder and how the killer almost got away, you can learn quite a bit, and what girl isn't fascinated with those shows? Anyway, he just laid there on the ground like a fish that had been out of water but hadn't quite died yet. He disgusted me. I dragged him to the bed that was covered in plastic wrap and started in on what became a pivotal moment of my future. He tried so hard to move while I restrained him, but with all the toxins and voltage coursing his body, he was so weak. As I began gracefully dragging my very well-sharpened knife across the curvature of his abdomen, he started to whimper and beg as to why. Let me tell you, this was just plain annoying, so I gagged him. I started to carve while watching tears roll down his face. The deeper I went, the harder he cried. I took my heels and shoved them into the open wounds over and over. Eventually, his soft cries became gargles and he started to asphyxiate. Watching his life vanish from his dreamy brown eyes was calming to me. After all, he tormented me and broke my heart first. From there, I focused on cleaning up. It wasn't too difficult. There was a lot of blood, but I knew how to keep it contained so that there wouldn't much of a mess. I wrapped him up in plastic wrap, stuck his body in my large suitcase before it hit rigor mortis, and fell asleep for a couple hours. I woke up early so I could grab some breakfast from room service. After I left with my suitcase through the back, I disposed of him. I would give you the details on that, but there has to be some things that remain secrets. I will tell you this though, it was like a weight being lifted off my shoulders knowing he was gone. For all the times he had choked and shoved me and made me feel so small and weak, it felt amazing to have the power and dominance over him. If only the struggle with awful men ended there though. Story 11, Guy who escaped from the asylum no one knew existed. This is one of those really corny stories which your mother tells you about where she used to live back in the day, but here it goes anyway. So, I'll start by saying that my mother when I was younger told me a story about someone who escaped from an asylum in a rural village here in the UK. She lived very in this area for the most part of her teenage/childhood years. It was quite common in the 70s/80s to have asylums locate in very rural areas so that they were kept well away from any signs of life. Unknown to the people who lived in the village, there was an asylum only 2 miles from the center of the town. So a good few years ago I was driving through this village with my mum when she recalled this story. I was actually quite young, so I'm not sure what my mum was thinking telling a child this kind of story. Nevertheless, a lady was filling up at petrol station not too far from her rural house in this village. It was quite late and she had just finished her night shift working at one of the local bars. Her boyfriend was nice enough to wait around outside and hop in the car for her short journey home. She stopped at a gas station to fill up petrol and her boyfriend offered for him to pay for her petrol. He told her to stay in the car and let him fill up the petrol, so she did so with a small grin on her face. About 15 minutes go past and she hears a bang on the roof, almost as if someone was jumping up and down on the roof. She attempted to get out of the car, but as she peered through her driver's side window she saw multiple police cars with policemen all yelling from all around her to not leave the car. After 5 minutes the banging seemed to stop. Concerned, the girl quickly got out of the car and asked the policeman where her boyfriend was and what had happened. Shortly after, one of the officers pointed towards another car which was parked behind the lady, and there she saw a man wearing no clothes with lifeless blank expression on his face, holding the dismembered and decapitated head of her boyfriend. Story has it that this guy had escaped from the local asylum and managed to find his way through the gates, through all the fields, and ran until he found lights. As soon as he escaped, it was reported to police, who sent patrols out into the village. The guy who escaped managed to find this gas station, saw this lady's boyfriend and proceeded to decapitate him with some kind of knife, and was jumping on the roof of his girlfriend's car with his head. I think it's safe to say I will never be going to that gas station anytime after 8 p.m. ever.